everyone who's watching. Welcome to the new version of At This Stage and Stage Notes. I know over the pandemic, Anna Ruffel was doing some fabulous interviews and talks. And so I am Lauren Van Hemert. I am with the Broadway Education Alliance. I am a journalist and member of the American Theater Critics Association, and I'm so pleased to be hosting this series. If you think about it and you like what you're seeing, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to us wherever you are watching this. You can also make some comments or add to the conversation by clicking on the comments, and I will let Robert know. This is my friend and colleague, Robert Sokol, who I adore. And I figured since this is our first time doing this, my first time in a minute going live, that I would want to do it with somebody who was my friend. So Robert's my guinea pig, but he's also an expert in cast albums because you have a hefty collection. So hello and welcome. And please tell people how many cast albums that you have.
Oh, Lauren, one never tells things like that. No, it would be embarrassing. Let's just say I have probably not the largest collection in the world, but I have more than any one person should have. It does run into five figures, so I'll give you that much.
And I'm sad. Robert moved, and he's got a new backdrop. But the last time we had this conversation, you had a card catalog, floor to ceiling, with all of your collection, and I miss the card catalog.
I still have it. It's in the other room, but it's just the computer works better in here. So yeah, no, that's still there.
Okay, good, um, good. I was listening to a conversation we had a few years ago, and you, like me, like I think a lot of other people, for us, movie musicals were our gateway into musical theater. A lot of those golden age movie musicals for me. What is your first movie musical recollection?
It wasn't golden age. If you want to talk about golden age film musicals, you're talking about MGM in the 50s, the 40s, 50s, and so on. And then in the 60s, it got kind of weird and different things were happening and some not very good stuff happened. But my gateway drug, as I refer to it, for movie musicals and musicals in general, was Dr. Dolittle in 1967. Rex Harrison, Anthony Newley, Samantha Eggar, Richard Attenborough in a Newley and Brickus score, Talk to the Animals, and all sorts of other wonderful, wonderful songs.
I love that you said that. For me, it was The Sound of Music with Julie Andrews at Radio City Music Hall. I think I was 5 or 6, and they brought it back for some anniversary. And I remember it was one of my first early memories, and probably my first cast recording, honestly, the Sound of Music record. So
Okay, I'll be that nerd and ask you: was it the cast recording or the soundtrack?
oh, it was a soundtrack.
Okay.
Julie Andrews, yes. And so let's go there, because I just made my own mistake. What is the difference between a cast album, cast recording, and a soundtrack?
So at the very base level, a soundtrack is anything that is attached to film or video, sound that goes with film or video. It's literally on the old 35 millimeter films. It was a track of material imprinted on the side of the film strip that carried the sound and allowed them to sync up. So a soundtrack, we still have soundtracks today. whatever the newest musical is that's coming out, the Color Purple will have a soundtrack which will be distinct from the cast recording, be it the original cast recording or the revival cast recording of the Broadway productions of The Color Purple.
Mm. I love that. Thank you for the distinction. And we're going to talk more about the cast recordings because they've been used in a variety of ways, some as marketing tools, some as concept albums. So I want to get into that, but before we leave the movie musical, we have a lot of young people that follow our socials,
which is a good thing.
Hello, Camp Broadway, if you're watching, Camp Broadway family. But something that may be foreign to them that I want to mention here is the use of ghost singers in a lot of these movie musicals. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that? And who were some of the famous ones?
Probably the most, well, first of all, let's talk about ghost singers. Movies like to create, particularly in the golden age of movies and musicals, they like to create an idealized world, a perfect world where everybody could sing, everybody could dance, everybody could act, everybody was beautiful and wore gorgeous clothes. Everything was perfect because that was the movies. Well, the reality was that not everybody could sing, dance, and act all at the same time, and they had to sweeten things along. So one of the things, and for the musical nerds in there, I recommend A Day in Hollywood, A Night in the Ukraine as something to explore because it addresses this very subject. But back to Lauren's question, one of the things they had to do was dub singers, and in the very classic movie musical Singin' in the Rain, you get a whole presentation of how that works about dubbing singers and what can happen when the word gets out that this singer is not actually singing her songs. So yeah, somebody else who's a good singer but not famous and not going to sell a whole lot of tickets becomes the voice behind the famous actor who doesn't really sing that well. The most famous ghost singer of all time was the wonderful, wonderful Marni Nixon. And she recorded a diverse set of soundtracks. She was Maria for Natalie Wood in West Side Story. She was Mrs. Anna for Deborah Kerr in The King and I, and she was Eliza for Audrey Hepburn in My Fair Lady. She recorded other things as well. She was the background singer on several other movie musicals, but those were the three big ones. And it was Deborah Kerr, who was such a class act that it was supposed to be a secret. But Deborah Kerr was like, oh, I can't sing like that. You have to meet Marni Nixon. And so the cat got out of the bag, and that's how everybody knew about ghost singers. But there were many more. There was a lady named Betty Wand who did not sing all of Rita Moreno's parts in West Side Story, but she sang some of the more difficult sections or notes for Rita in West Side Story. And what's very interesting now is if you go to some of the online resources like Spotify or something like that, you'll see that when you're looking at the soundtrack for West Side Story, it doesn't say Natalie Wood and Rita Moreno. It says Marni Nixon and Betty Wand singing A Boy Like That and I Have a Love.
Unbelievable. And I'm not sure in this PC day and age that would fly anymore. Plus, we have all sorts of audio tuning that can make even a terrible singer like me sound good. But
there is auto tune, and there is a whole subgenre of criticism about why the live action Disney musicals of the last 10 years sound so terrible.
And that is a conversation for another day. We'll let Disney have their moment because they just had their big convention and announced all sorts of new musicals. The Greatest Showman, Hercules. I'm excited to see what they come out with on stage. And then we'll get a Frozen pro shot, apparently, with Samantha Barks, which will be really nice. moving on away from the movie musical genre, what is the earliest original Broadway cast recording, or original cast recording as we think of it?
Well, so cast recordings actually reach back to the 1800s. In 1899, there was a musical in Britain that came to Broadway. It was called Florodora. And for anybody who's seen Sunday in the Park with George, there's a sequence in the second act where Marie, the grandmother of modern day George, is talking about Dot, the character from the first act. And she says, "Oh, yes, my mother was a Florodora girl." And Florodora is that 1899 musical that was recorded, and it was lost for a long time, but some enterprising archival music company found the recordings and in fact released Florodora on CD. So now you can listen to Florodora, the original 1899 London cast.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna, if it is on Spotify or streaming or anywhere where people can listen to it, I will put a link to it. I love that you shared that.
I love show and tell. I really love show and tell. So 1899, you've got what ostensibly could be considered the first cast recording, comes from London. In the decades following that, operettas, things like Die lustige Witwe, which is better known in the United States as The Merry Widow, and The Chocolate Soldier and things like that, they were recorded in the early 1900s. That was followed by British cast recordings of their homegrown stuff, like the Gilbert and Sullivan operettas from the D'Oyly Carte Opera. And then, in a really sort of weird twist, in the 20s, Broadway musicals that then went to London after they were a success on Broadway wound up being recorded with the London casts, but not with the Broadway originals. So you've got things like what I call the girl musicals, Irene, Sally, and Rosemarie, which all were recorded in London in the 20s before they were recorded in the United States. And then Showboat also was recorded with the London company before it was recorded in the United States. You jump ahead into the 40s and you've got a big change in cast recording history. There was a recording of Porgy and Bess in 1940 that had some members of the 1935 Premier Company in it, particularly Helen Morgan, who sang Bill, and Paul Robeson, who sang Old Man River. But then came 1943, and since you're enjoying show and tell, I will do this too. Then came 1943 and this, which was the original cast recording of Oklahoma. It came out on shellac, on 78 shellac. I'm sure most of your younger viewers have not seen anything like this, but this is the actual 1943. Let me get it. Let me straighten it up and get it in the camera. And they could only fit like one or two songs on each one, and so
they're super thick.
They're very thick, very thick. There they are, very thick.
Okay.
Heftier than your current LP or the semi-current LP. And so there would be like 4 to 6 of these in a package like this to give you all of the songs from the musical. So this is considered by many to be the very first cast recording in modern parlance. But there was a lot of stuff that happened before that. It was released on Decca Records. They went nuts. They followed up with One Touch of Venus and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. And from there on, Broadway musicals pretty much dominated pop culture and the American songbook until the late 50s, early 60s, when rock and roll and Elvis hit, and then all of a sudden pop music just went a different direction.
Laura Frost on Facebook said "wowza," and I'm with you. His collection is pretty wowza. He's only showing us a smidgen of of what's in his collection for show and tell. Um, I've heard you talk when we've talked in the past about set tracks and cast recordings and them being one of the same. But when people refer to set tracks, what are they talking about?
Set tracks?
I thought in
Um,
our last conversation you were talking about set tracks.
uh, no, I think maybe we're talking about soundtracks and cast recording.
Mm-mm.
No?
No. Okay. Well, moving on.
Okay.
And it could just be me that I was listening wrong.
Are
Robert and
you
I had a conversation about this very topic 4 years ago, so I re-listened to it to prepare us for this. Um, Historically, the cast album has been used as a marketing tool, and one might argue it's still used as a marketing tool.
I think almost more so now than in the past, because the producing cast recordings is an incredibly expensive process. It's also an incredibly fraught process, and if anybody wants to get even a glimmer of an idea of what it was like, particularly in the 60s and 70s, to record cast albums, and it basically what happens with a Broadway cast album is on a Monday, right after the opening of the show, the cast goes to a studio and spends 1 8-hour day, for which I believe they are paid 1 week's salary, to record the entire show. And if they go over, they get another week's salary. And so that's kind of how the cast recording process works. So you've got actors and orchestras and all of this stuff that has to be coordinated. It's very expensive. And one of the reasons that cast albums started to drop off from being produced was because of that expense. But the producers are investing more and more in cast recordings, because if you own this property, this musical that you've managed to get to Broadway, you want some sort of recording that you can put out there for the secondary market so that people can hear it and get a sense of what it's like and want to produce it at their regional or community theaters. So it's probably even more valuable today for future productions than it was for selling tickets originally.
I totally agree. I think whenever I think of cast recordings and how they really changed the trajectory of a show, I think to Be More Chill, because Be More Chill, was out there in New Jersey,
Mhm.
and then put out an album and some music videos,
Mhm.
or not even music videos as we would call them, but cast singing
Mhm.
just like a cover of the show tune, and it really popularized that show in a way that I think even the creators didn't expect. Would you agree?
I would say Be More Chill is a very particular example of what you're describing. It developed a cult following of its own, a really passionate, engaged cult following who would lobby for the show and helped get it to Broadway when, for all intents and purposes, after the New Jersey production, a lot of people considered it a done deal, and it's the last we're going to hear about that one. So yeah, I mean, in that sense of using it as a marketing tool, it sort of proves the point that I was just making. It helped get that show produced, and you could sort of consider what they did sort of a throwback to the old school demo recordings that used to be put out, and then that sort of became in the 70s something called a concept album.
And I want to touch on the concept album because Lin Manuel Miranda just announced he's going to make a concept album for a new musical called The Warriors. But this has been around a long time. Andrew Lloyd Webber, I feel like, is the king of the concept album.
You took the
So,
words out of my mouth.
so talk about the concept album and how creators, artists, producers have been using them to get their shows produced.
Yeah, the term concept album is highly subjective, and everybody's definition is going to vary a bit. Um, like I mentioned before, there used to be demos, and sometimes they were, like you'd have backers auditions where Stephen Sondheim would go and sit and play the new songs from Sweeney Todd while Hal Prince talked about what it was going to look like, but those were done live. And then sometimes they were, like recorded on cassettes and circulated around. Some producers would record on vinyl, not for public release, but demos of things. 1776 is a great example of that. There are many versions of that floating around. So there were these demos, there were these promos, but the concept album really, and to be fair, in the pop music world, there were concept albums that were thematically driven. Frank Sinatra is noted for doing like his Manhattan Tower album, which was very thematically driven. It had a concept, it was just never intended to turn into a stage production. The concept album as a precursor to the stage production really does begin with Andrew Lloyd Webber. There naturally some things before that, there always are, but he and Tim Rice did Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Jesus Christ Superstar, and this is like Joseph was 68, Superstar was 70, Evita 1976, and then Chess in 1980. Or I'm sorry, Chess is the ABBA folks, but they after Evita they followed up with Love Never Dies, and that had a concept album also. So in the 70s there was a lot of that. It happened in Europe. There's a show called Starmania, which began as a concept album. Jeff Wayne took the famous War of the Worlds radio broadcast and created a concept album out of that. For shows that will be more familiar, Jekyll and Hyde by Frank Wildhorn and Leslie Bricusse, they started out as a concept album. A wonderful show called The Life by Cy Coleman was originally a concept album where he took all of the songs and had pop artists record them and put that out 2 years before the show was ever produced. Notre Dame de Paris is another one of those that began life as a concept album. Very popular now is Hadestown. It had a concept album before it got on the stage, and everybody's talking about Jamie, another one that had a concept album before it got on the stage. So yes, and now you mentioned Lin-Manuel Miranda and Warriors, which I'm very much looking forward to. Little tidbit: one of my favorite unrealized concept albums is a little tuner called Miss Spectacular, and it's a score written by Jerry Herman. It was developed as a concept album. Again, lots of different performers recording different numbers that were intended to be in the show. Never got produced.
Unbelievable. The one concept album. Well, and did we mention the Who's Tommy? Probably. I mean, they just had this.
Well, yeah. So here I there's like a subgenre of the subgenre. Tommy, American Idiot, Jagged Little Pill, Illinois. I don't think any of these recordings were made with the idea that we're going to make a Broadway musical out of this recording. These recordings had, and then there's the whole other thing of rock operas, pop operas, and rock operas, where there's an arc, there's a story, there are characters that are developed throughout the course of the performance, but they're not necessarily, or at least originally were not necessarily intended to be stage productions and specifically Broadway musicals. So yeah, I think that's like a subgenre within the subgenre.
Okay. I will follow you there. I'll follow you anywhere, really, Robert. But truly, don't tell our husbands. But but I and this is why I so wanted to talk to you about this, because it's National Vinyl Record Day and it feels like a good day to talk about these things. Um, when you talk about concept albums that were never produced, like the Jerry Herman piece you just talked about, are there albums where the show is such a bomb or so bad, but the score is so good that the cast recording has is a must listen to?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a flop no more, but Merrily We Roll Along, 1981, 19 performances, huge loss of money, huge loss of prestige, and just very damaging. It was the thing that ostensibly ended the creative partnership between Stephen Sondheim and Harold Prince. But it had the most amazing score. You cannot sit and listen to just the overture. I defy anybody to sit and listen to just the overture and say something exciting is not going to happen here, because it is a brilliant overture. And the rest of the score, Good Thing Going, Not a Day Goes By, Putting It Together. I'm sorry, that's Sunday in the Park with George. Oops, my Sondheim. But just a ton of really excellent songs coming out of Merrily We Roll Along. So flop no more. Maria Friedman solved that problem, and thank her for that. Some
And
others.
we have a new cast recording.
Yes, we do.
So you can get that on vinyl or anywhere you stream or listen to cast recordings.
Some things that have stuck with me over the years. There's a show called Pretty Belle by Bob Merrill and Julie Stein, starred Angela Lansbury. Never got to Broadway, but they recorded it and released it years after the fact with Angela and some members of the original cast. It's a deeply twisted musical, and I can understand why they decided to pull the plug on the musical, but it's got a great score in it, and Angela sounds fabulous on the recording. So I say listen to that. There's a show called Rags by Stephen Schwartz and Charles Strauss, considered a flop in its time, but the score is magnificent, and Teresa Strata singing that score is just glorious. A little personal cult favorite of mine is something called Doonesbury, written by Gary Trudeau and Liz Swados. It's based on his cartoon Doonesbury, and it's just the sweetest little show with some really, really funny numbers in there. I was lucky enough to see it on Broadway in like 1983 because I'm old, and it was just a lot of fun. Useful, useless tidbit. One of the stars of the show is a lady named Kate Burton, who happens to be the daughter of Richard Burton. Go figure. And then Mac and Mabel, which was considered a flop in its time also. Did not last very long, but one of, I think, Jerry Herman's best scores, most interesting scores, most challenging scores. So that's just, a handful that appeal to me, albums that I go back to over the years and still want to listen to. And I encourage folks to explore a book called Not Since Carrie, which is another wonderful flop score, which has had a renaissance. But there's a book called Not Since Carrie. It's written by a man named Ken Mandelbaum. I encourage people to seek it out. It covers the flop genre from about 1950 to 1990. And it's got just a treasure trove of data in there that people can go start looking for these recordings, whether they're commercial releases or other things you find on the internet, on YouTube or places like that. So I really recommend that. And I'll throw in one more, which is a flop only on Broadway because it's a huge hit in Europe. And in Europe, it's called Tanz der Vampire, or Le Bal du Vampire, or all sorts of things that have the word vampire in it. On Broadway, it was called Dance of the Vampires, and it was a disaster. But the score by Jim Steinman, who wrote Total Eclipse of the Heart, totally fun, totally silly, and well worth it. I've seen it twice now. I've seen it in Paris and I've seen it in Germany, in Cologne, and it's just hysterically funny.
It's so interesting you mentioned Not Since Carrie the book. I just wrote a post on Stage Notes about musicals where sports takes center stage for theater fans who were forced to watch the Olympics 24/7 like myself and had nothing to do other than think about how many sports musicals are there other than Bring It On and the ones we know of late. And one that came up was All American,
Mhm.
Mel Brooks musical that was considered a flop. But in that book, he talks about how Mel Brooks' experience on that show inspired him to write The Producers.
Mhm.
So fun facts. So
Broadway is full of fun facts. The little dotted lines and connections that you make, and it's, oh my God, she was in this, and then she was married to him, and he then worked on that.
it,
They're
it
no.
yeah, it's very interconnected. I'm actually binge watching Smash now because, of course, that is coming to Broadway. And I didn't want, don't judge any people out there who know how obsessed I am with the theater, but I never watched it when it was on television. So I am binge watching it now, and it's fun to see all the intertwinings, interconnections.
And it's also fun to see all of these fabulous Broadway performers, getting extra paychecks on television.
Oh my gosh, Megan Hilty, Bernadette Peter. I mean, it's Brian Darcy James. I mean, it's a who's who. It's really enjoyable. If you haven't watched it, binge it like
Yep.
me, and then we can talk about it.
Let's
How,
let's do one of these about Smash.
oh, I would love that. And one of our friends from the Broadway Education Alliance is a co-producer on Smash, so maybe we can get him in here to talk with us. I'd love that.
Excellent. Excellent.
Okay, so one thing I do want to ask you. And I'm going to add to the flop list. That's just so much fun to listen to. So my guilty pleasure is Diana the musical, and whenever I'm in a bad mood, I will pop that on streaming, and it's such a fun, ridiculous listen. So that would be my flop recommendation. Um, how has streaming changed the game for cast recordings? Because, I love that you held up the Oklahoma record. For Christmas, my husband actually got me the Sound of Music soundtrack from when I was a babe. But back in the day, we didn't have any choice. We had to buy these big clunky records.
Hey.
Now they're kind of trendy. People love the vinyl again, but how's streaming changing the game?
Oh, oh. I spent a lot of years being a streaming denier, a total streaming denier. I want to be able to pick up the Florodora CD and hold it in my hand. And it has, for me, it was a big adjustment to go from the wonderful 12-inch LP, Dr. Dolittle, the big gatefold, two-sided with the picture book inside that you could look through. I should have pulled that out for show and tell. Then to go down to 5.25 by 5.25, and like 3-point font that you need a magnifying glass for. But at least it was still something that you could have hold in your hand and play it whenever you wanted to, and you didn't have to pay for it every month. And there were a lot of reasons why I just said streaming is not for me. And then I decided, okay, 3-month free offer from Spotify, I'll give it a try. And I was blown away by how much stuff was available. As you well know, a lot of like you and I are old enough to remember like the RCA Record Club and things like that.
Oh, speak for yourself. I'm only 20 something.
Okay. I'm old enough to remember the RCA Record Club where you could get like 14. First it was albums, and then it was cassettes. Remember those? And then it was CDs, for a penny, and then you just had to buy one more a month for the next 500 years. And it was always a challenge to find enough cast recordings to fill up that 14 for a penny offer to get you started. But with streaming, I've just been gobsmacked by how much stuff is out there. And particularly in my weird little niche interest, which is international recordings of musicals, both English language originals that started on Broadway or the West End, and original musicals from Spain, Germany, Tokyo, Israel, wherever. So I've been astonished, like you want, if I'm trying to find, Hairspray in German, it's on Spotify. If I'm trying to find, all sorts of obscure original stuff, it's on Spotify. So I can at least hear it before I make a commitment to buy the physical media, which I still do.
I love that, and to me, there is nothing like holding a record, holding something tangible, particularly albums that have the book inside where you open it up. And I shared today on social media. I just received the Outsiders album. I really like the score very much, although again, don't come at me, people. Didn't love the show, not my favorite, not my thing. But I did like the album, and I did get I did like the score, and I did get the album, and it has the beautiful color pictures. And there's something to that. There's something about that I just love. So I need something tangible, just like a playbill. Don't give me a QR code. I need a tangible thing. That's
As a graphic designer and publisher of playbills, I thank you for that. But so the other downside to streaming for me was that if I decided I didn't want to pay the monthly fee anymore, all of a sudden all that music is gone because I can't access it anymore, because most streamers don't let you download and hang on to it. And also there were quality questions. I mean, I'm old again. I don't have like a brilliant ear. So I don't get into the fights about how vinyl sounds better than CDs and all that. Y'all go have that conversation elsewhere. But there are, a 96 kpbs download of a score versus a FLAC file or an AIFF file. There are, measurable differences in that sort of thing. The other thing, yes, the packaging, because even with digital releases that you buy and download that you can keep forever on Amazon or Apple Music or any of those, too often they don't bother creating a digital book to go with it. And so you have no information. So it's great if you've seen the show and you know what's going on. But if you haven't and you're trying to sample something, you have no information about who's singing or what's what. Not a good step for producers who don't make digital booklets available. The other challenge with streaming, to my mind, is, and again, why I like to have things, is that license agreements change. And all of a sudden, what was available on Spotify yesterday is not available today. And that happens with everything. That happens with streaming video. That happens with streaming music. That happens with other types of subscription services where, the deals just change and you don't get a vote generally in what's going to change. So something that you may have liked to listen to once a month is all of a sudden no longer there.
Yes, it's that is the downfall of streaming for sure, is these licensing deals that it's there one day and not the next.
Yeah.
And another argument to having something tangible. I'm not going to ask you whether you prefer the CD or vinyl format or which sounds better, but I will ask you, do you have a favorite vinyl recording since it's National Vinyl Record Day?
My favorite vinyl recordings are the ones that have not made it to digital. How's that for an answer? So, for instance, the Brazilian cast recording of Evita is only available on vinyl and only if you can find it. And it is a fabulous recording of Evita. And the woman, Brazilian artist named Claudia, only goes by Claudia. And she's singing in Portuguese, which is the language they speak in Brazil. And she is just off the charts. When she sings Rainbow High and What's New Buenos Aires, it's incredible. So yes, there's a piece of vinyl that I play on a regular basis. And yes, I have gone through the exercise of digitizing some things. It's laborious. It's very laborious. And there are people with far better equipment than I who can do a better job of it.
I don't have an extensive vinyl collection, but one vinyl recording to me that just sounds better on vinyl than anywhere else I've heard it, and it's not a cast recording, but it's Ellery Ward's Sondheim series of recordings.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a Sondheim fan and you don't know who Ellery Ward is, I would encourage you to find and listen to her. Her voice is intoxicating, and her covers of these songs are beautiful, but definitely sounds better on vinyl. Hers, because it's very folksy and artsy, and it sounds like you're just in an indie coffee house listening to her. So
I think a lot of that is a lot of the vinyl versus digital argument is driven by what kind of equipment you have and how you listen. If you have really good equipment and you listen attentively, sitting down and only listening to the recording and doing it with headphones on, possibly, or with like super expensive speakers, I bet you that yes, vinyl provides a richer, warmer, better, crisper, insert adjective here sound than listening to a CD. That's not generally my listening practice, and I'll say it again, I'm old, so my ears don't work as well as they used to. So for me, it has not made as much difference. It has not made it's what's the phrase? A distinction without a difference to me at this stage in my cast album career.
what is your favorite? You mentioned the Brazilian Evita cast.
Mm-hmm.
Other favorite international recordings. I have a friend who's about to go into Rent in Japan, and so I will be very curious about that. But any other foreign international recordings that are favorite?
Funny you should ask.
I
just
that
have. So here's Evita again. This time the Madrid production with Paloma San Basilio, and she is. Wait, I've got to find the spot here. I've got to learn the spot. Okay, there's the spot. She is magnificent. Also, it's a great recording from the '80s, and I highly recommend it. Next to Normal out of Germany. Glorious, glorious recording. Diana is played by a magnificent Dutch performer named Pia Douwes. She performs regularly in both English and Dutch, or I'm sorry, German and Dutch. She's kind of, there are two magnificent Dutch actresses for musical theater. Pia is one. I describe her as the Dutch Patti LuPone. And the other is Simone Kleinsma, who I describe as the Dutch Angela Lansbury meets Gwen Verdon. So Next to Normal, excellent recording. I highly recommend it. Back in soundtrack land, Pesadilla Antes de Navidad, which you probably know as The Nightmare Before Christmas by Danny Elfman. It was released in Spanish, in German, and in French. And I found all of those soundtracks, not cast recordings. Although I'm waiting for them to do a stage version of The Nightmare Before Christmas. I really am. But this is a lot of fun. 9 from Teatro Muzyczne de Poznan, which is in Poland. And so it's a Polish production of 9. This theater company has put out a lot of cast recordings, and they do a really, really good job with them. So if you're ever in Poland, go to Poznan and try and see one of their shows. And then last for this little section is Evita again, but this time in Dutch, again with Pia Dallas. And I highly recommend listening to her as well. So, a lot there. It's where I spend most of my time and research now, and most of my ear time is with the international cast recordings.
I love that so much. There are many shows that are releasing their cast recordings. Water for Elephants, the Wiz. Some haven't come out on vinyl yet. Some are coming out on vinyl. Stereophonic, which could be debated musical or not, but either way, they're coming out with an original cast album in October. Sunset Boulevard. Any recordings, either here in the States or international recordings, you're looking forward to their release?
Well, you mentioned one, Sunset Boulevard with Nicole Scherzinger. The clips I've seen, she's just electric, and so I'm really looking forward to hearing that whole score reimagined the way that Jamie Lloyd has put it together. So that's definitely on my list. Warriors, which we talked about before. The movie of Warriors has a warm spot in my heart because I'm a huge fan of Lynn Thigpen, who was on Broadway in Working and in Tin Types, and died way too young from cancer. But she was in the film of Warriors, and she had the role of the DJ. So all you ever saw was her mouth speaking into the microphone. But she was in the whole movie, but just that bit. And she was brilliant. She had a glorious speaking and singing voice. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Miranda does with Warriors. Something else that I'm looking forward to listening to, and I get to do it real soon, is Nenormalny. This just arrived in the mail last week. It is the Czech cast recording of Next to Normal. There, like I was talking about the theater in Poland, in Poznan, there is a wonderful little theater company called Metské Divadlo Brno in the Czech Republic, or Czechia as some folks call it, and they have released many, many, many cast recordings. Everything from the poppy sort of stuff like Mamma Mia and other fun stuff like that, to more serious scores like Titanic or The Last Ship and things like that. So I just now got this, and I'm really looking forward to listening to it as well.
And Next to Normal is also having a re-release of their original Broadway cast recording with Alice Ripley. So that'll be interesting too. It's a really nice score. It's a heartbreaking musical, but it is a nice, beautiful score.
There have been some videos of the London production with Casey Levy, some in the studio just singing the songs kind of thing. Look for them on YouTube because it's some of the best singing of this score that I have heard since the original company.
I'm not a huge Frozen fan, but Casey Levy is phenomenal. Her voice is just gorgeous.
Yeah.
Really gorgeous. And almost an hour has flown by. So we did it. We made it. I felt a little rusty, but I feel like I've gotten my live chat mojo back. And so hopefully we will do more of these wherever you're watching us. Please make sure you follow us and subscribe. Broadway Stage Notes now has a podcast. If you're interested in another musical that has a cast recording, Back to the Future. I did a really fun interview with Tim Hatley, the set designer, and we talk all about that DeLorean, that flying DeLorean. So we'll be doing more of these. Please subscribe to the podcast or follow us on social media so you know when we're going to do the next one. And we'll have to schedule something about Smash. Let me finish binging it, and then we'll schedule it. I love that.
Like a plan.
Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you joined us late, you can start from the beginning wherever you're watching. As soon as we go off the streaming, you'll be able to. I was going to say, as soon as we go off the air, I know. I keep thinking we're on the air, but we're really we're in the air. We're in the cloud somewhere, but. You'll be able to start this over and watch it whenever you'd like. Thanks so much, Robert. This was fun.
It was very much a fun thing for me to do. I love getting to spend time with you, having time with you, because we haven't done it in a long time. We've just emails and things and so on. So this is fun and getting to play in my favorite sandbox.
I love that. And I love that. And so hopefully we'll be having many more conversations. Thank you. Thank you, Laura, for all your contributions. She was actively commenting. I think you may have a international broadcast recording collector in the making. She's ready to go and listen to some. So thank you, Laura, for watching and commenting. And I always say I'll see you at the theater. So I will see you at the theater, Robert.
Good. Let's do that.
All right. Thanks so much.